We believe our history is a straight line. An arrow of progress, shot from a primitive, superstitious past, flying true towards our own, brilliant, technological present. We look at the ancient world, especially Egypt, and we see a civilization frozen in time, a monolithic culture that seems to have existed in a state of perfect, unchanging stasis for millennia. This perception is reinforced by the very artifacts they left behind: the pyramids, silent and imposing; the hieroglyphs, a beautiful but seemingly static form of writing; and the art, with its rigid, two-dimensional figures that appear to repeat themselves endlessly across tomb walls and temple reliefs. We see a people obsessed with death, with the preservation of the body, with a complex and unchanging pantheon of gods. For 3,000 years, the story seems the same gods: the jackal-headed Anubis, the falcon-headed Horus, the cow-horned Isis, the sun god Amun-Ra. The same art, rigid, perfect, two-dimensional, unchanging; the same obsession, the perfect preservation of the body for an eternal, complex afterlife. A civilization defined by its endless, cyclical, beautiful stasis. This is the story we are told. But this story is a lie, because in the long, 3,000-year history of Egypt, there is a ghost. A phantom. A period of time so violent, so radical, so wrong, that the Egyptians themselves tried to pretend it never happened. It is the story of a single man. A king. A pharaoh who, in a reign of just 17 years, broke everything. He smashed the gods. He fired the priests. He closed the temples. He abandoned the capital city. He revolutionized art, life, and death. He took 3,000 years of tradition, and he set it on fire. And in return, his successors tried to delete him from history. They chiseled his name from every stone. They tore his city to the ground. They smashed his statues. They removed his name from every official king list. They cursed him as the heretic, the criminal, the enemy of Amarna. They executed a damnatio memoriae, a damnation of memory. The first, and most thorough, deleting of a human being from the official record. This is the mystery of Akhenaten. The pharaoh who shouldn't exist. Who was this man? What was his radical, dangerous idea? And what was his curse? A strange, alien-like art style, a family of elongated skulls and twisted bodies, that so terrified his people. And the greatest question of all, in trying to erase him, did the pharaohs accidentally ensure that his idea, his one, single, dangerous idea, would escape and conquer the world? To understand the heretic, we must first understand the orthodoxy he tried to destroy. We must go to the 18th dynasty, the New Kingdom. This is not the pyramid-building age. This is imperial Egypt. This is Egypt at the absolute zenith of its power and wealth. The pharaoh is a god-king. His name is Amenhotep III, the Magnificent. He is the richest man on earth. Gold, his letters to foreign kings claim, is like dust in his land. His capital city, Thebes, is the center of the world. And the center of Thebes is the temple of Karnak. Karnak was not just a temple. It was the Vatican, the Pentagon, and the Federal Reserve of its day. It was the home of the state god, Amun-Ra. And the priesthood of Amun was the true power in Egypt. These priests, they were the state within a state. They were not just holy men. They were astronomers, they were kingmakers, they were political operators. And they were rich. It is estimated that by this time, the priesthood of Amun owned 1/3 of all the land in Egypt. Their power rivaled that of Pharaoh himself. This was the stable, golden, perfectly balanced world. And into this world, a prince was born. The heir. His name was Amenhotep IV. But he was different. He was not a warrior. He was not a builder like his father. He was a poet, a mystic, a strange, introspective boy who, the records suggest, was perhaps physically weak. He was a dreamer. And he had an idea. Or, perhaps, it had him. He grew up under the shadow of the great sun god, Amun-Ra. But he was drawn to a different, more ancient, more abstract aspect of the sun. Not the god, but the physical disc. The Aten, for the first 5 years of his reign, he played the part. He was crowned Amenhotep IV. Amen is satisfied. He ruled from Thebes. He even, reluctantly, built at the temple of Karnak, and then something snapped. In year 5 of his reign, the revolution began. He did not just challenge the priesthood of Amen. He declared war on them. He declared war on all the gods. He changed his name. He renounced Amenhotep. He became Akhenaten, he who is effective for the Aten. And he declared that the Aten was the one, true, only God. This was not just a shift in focus. This was the birth of a new idea. An idea that had never, in the history of the human race, been the official religion of a state. Monotheism. The Aten was not a man with a falcon's head. It was not a jackal. It was not a cow. It was an abstract, universal, genderless force. In Akhenaten's new art, the Aten is shown as a sun disk. Its rays, its light, are not just light. They are arms, they are hands. And they stretch down, not to all people, but only to Akhenaten, his wife Nefertiti, and their daughters. And at the end of each ray, each hand, it holds the Ankh, the symbol of life. The theology was revolutionary. The Aten was the creator of all things, the loving, sustaining, universal father of all mankind. Egyptians, Nubians, Syrians, all of them, but the political implication was brutal. If the Aten is the only god, then Amun-Ra is a lie. Osiris is a lie. Isis, Anubis, Thoth, Horus, all of them are demons, frauds. And the priesthood of Amun? They are not just rich. They are charlatans. Their power, their land, their wealth is illegitimate. With this single theological move, Akhenaten was not just reforming a religion. He was staging a coup. He was breaking the power of the priests, the single greatest threat to his throne. But it was more than a coup. It was an exodus. He could not rule from Thebes. The city was polluted, stained by the worship of Amun. The air itself was heresy. So, in year 5, he rode a chariot out into the middle of the desert, to a vast, untouched, crescent-shaped bay of cliffs, 250 miles north of Thebes. A place that was of no god, and no goddess. And he raised his hands, and declared that here, he would build his new capital. His Vatican for the one true God. He called it Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today, we call it Amarna. The city was built with a speed that defies belief. In just a few years, a city of 50,000 people rose from the raw, virgin desert. Palaces of glittering white gypsum, the largest open-air temples the world had ever seen, with no roofs, so the Aten's rays could flood every corner. Worker villages, noble estates, police stations, bakeries. It was a city designed for the new art, the new life, the new religion, and it is here, in the ruins of Amarna, that we find the second mystery. The one that has baffled scientists and fueled 1,000 fringe theories. The art. Before Akhenaten, for 3,000 years, Egyptian art was rigid. It was not art. It was theology. The pharaoh had to be perfect. A perfect body, muscular, young, emotionless, striding forward into eternity. It was a symbol of power, not a portrait of a man. Akhenaten destroyed this. He ordered his artists to depict him and his family as they really were, or, at least, as he wanted to be seen. And the images are shocking. They are bizarre. They are almost grotesque. The first statues and reliefs of Akhenaten are a radical break. He is not a muscular hero. He is strange. He has a long, thin, drooping face, a long, elegant neck, narrow, sloping shoulders, a soft, pot belly, wide, feminine, curving hips and heavy thighs, spindly, stick-like legs. He is androgynous. He is almost alien, and it wasn't just him. It was his family. His wife, the immortal Nefertiti. Her beauty is legendary. But in many of the statues, she too has this strange, elongated skull. And their daughters, they are shown with skulls that are impossibly elongated, stretched backwards, like a cone. What is this? For over a century, this has been the central debate. Theory 1. It is just art. It is a stylistic choice. This is the naturalism, or expressionism theory. Akhenaten, the poet king, was casting off the rigid lie of old art. He was showing the world as it really was. He was showing emotion. We see, for the first time in Egyptian history, the royal family in intimate, candid moments. Akhenaten, kissing his daughter. Nefertiti, bouncing a child on her knee. They are human. And the strange bodies? Perhaps it was a new religious style. The Aten was a genderless god, the father and mother of all things. So, Akhenaten, his prophet on earth, had to be both. He had to be a fusion of male and female. The androgynous body was a theological statement. This is the standard, academic view, but it is not the only one. Theory 2. It is real. It is pathology. This theory states, this is not art. This is a portrait. This is what they actually looked like. The family, this theory goes, was riddled with a genetic disorder. The symptoms, the long face, the long fingers, arachnodactyly, a strange body shape. These are classic signs of a genetic disease like Marfan syndrome. Or, perhaps, Froelich syndrome, a hormonal disorder that causes the feminine fat distribution, or craniosynostosis, a condition where the skull plates fuse too early, forcing the skull to grow backwards. This would explain so much. It would explain the curse on his lineage. His son, Tutankhamun. King Tut. We have his body. We know from CT scans and DNA that he was a frail, sick boy. He had a club foot. He had a cleft palate. He had bone necrosis. He had multiple strains of malaria. He was the product of a damaged, and very likely incestuous, bloodline. Akhenaten may have married his own sister to produce Tutankhamun. The heretic's strange body was a real, physical ailment, which he, in his religious fervor, chose to deify. He wasn't hiding his deformity. He was celebrating it as a mark of divine favor. This is a powerful, scientific theory. And it leads, inevitably, to Theory 3, the not of this world theory. This is the fringe. This is the theory that asks, what if it's not a disease? What if it's real? What if the art is a literal depiction of a family that was different? This is where the ancient alien theorists come in. They look at the elongated skulls. They look at the strange, unhuman bodies. They look at the Aten, a disk in the sky, shooting down rays of life. And they ask, was Akhenaten human, or was he a hybrid? Was his Aten not a god, but a visitorship? Was this a contact event? Was he a star child, put on the throne to deliver a new message of universal peace? This theory seems insane. But the art is what fuels it. The art is the evidence. The bodies are the evidence. They do not look like us. And the knowledge. The sudden, radical leap to a pure, abstract, universal monotheism, a thought virus that did not exist on earth before him. Where did it come from? This is the enigma of Amarna. While Akhenaten and Nefertiti held their strange, intimate court in their utopian desert city, writing beautiful, haunting hymns to their god, the Aten, the world outside was burning. We know this because we found the Amarna letters. In the ruins of the city, archaeologists found the entire state archive. Not on papyrus, but on cuneiform clay tablets. They are the diplomatic correspondence from the kings of the entire ancient world. And they are desperate. The vassal kings of Syria and Palestine are writing, the Hittites are attacking. Our cities are being burned. The king, my lord, has done nothing. Send me gold. Send me troops. Why have you abandoned us? One after another. They are letters of pure panic. And Akhenaten, in his divine, sun-drenched bubble, did nothing. The empire, built by his warrior ancestors, was collapsing. He was not a king. He was a fundamentalist, a zealot. His revolution turned dark. He wasn't content to ignore the old gods. He decided to destroy them. He sent out teams of men, with chisels. Their mission, to eradicate the name Amun-Ra from every temple, every tomb, every obelisk, in Egypt. But he went further. He began to erase the word for gods, in the plural. This was a new, terrifying kind of intolerance. It was not enough for his God to be right. All other gods had to be wrong. He even desecrated the tomb of his own father, Amenhotep III, chiseling out the name Amun from his father's sarcophagus. The people of Egypt were terrified. This was not a political war. This was a metaphysical one. The afterlife, a cornerstone of Egyptian belief for millennia, was thrown into chaos. The elaborate rituals, the spells from the Book of the Dead, the entire pantheon of gods who guided the soul through the underworld, all were declared false. Akhenaten's new religion offered a starkly different vision of what came after death. There was no Osiris to judge the dead, no Anubis to weigh the heart. Instead, the soul of the deceased would continue to exist only as long as they worshipped the Aten, and by extension, Akhenaten himself. This was a terrifying prospect for a people who had invested so much in their eternal salvation. The revolution was not just a top-down imposition of a new god. It was a fundamental assault on the Egyptian worldview. The backlash was inevitable. The priesthood of Amun, stripped of their power and wealth, went underground, plotting their revenge. The military, neglected and demoralized as the empire crumbled, grew restless. The common people, their beliefs shattered and their traditions desecrated, were filled with fear and resentment. The utopian city of Akhenaten, once a symbol of a new dawn, became a gilded cage, isolated from the growing turmoil in the rest of the country. The death of Akhenaten in his 17th year of rule plunged the country into a crisis. His successors, Smenkhare and the young Tutankhamun, were unable to hold the fragile new order together. The old gods, and their powerful priesthood, came roaring back. The court abandoned Amarna, returning to Thebes. The temples of Amun were reopened and restored. The name of Akhenaten was cursed, his images destroyed, his city left to crumble into the desert sands. The damnatio memoriae was so thorough that for centuries, he was all but forgotten, a brief, heretical blip in the long history of Egypt. The theological chasm between Atonism and the traditional Egyptian religion, the orthodoxy Akhenaten sought to destroy, was vast and profound. It was not merely a change in the principal deity. It was a complete inversion of the spiritual cosmos. Traditional Egyptian religion was a rich, complex tapestry of local gods, cosmic forces, and personal deities. It was a polytheistic system where the divine was immanent, present in every aspect of life, in the Nile, in the harvest, in the sun's daily journey, and in the very soil of Egypt. The gods were anthropomorphic, zoomorphic, or a combination of both, making them relatable and accessible. Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, was a hidden, mysterious power, a force that could be petitioned and appeased through the elaborate rituals performed by the priesthood in the dark, secluded inner sanctums of Karnak. The relationship between man and God was mediated by the priests and the Pharaoh, who was himself a divine intermediary. Atonism, by contrast, was a radical, abstract, and utterly transcendent faith. The Aten, the sun disk, was not a hidden god. It was visible, tangible, and universal. It was the sole source of life, light, and warmth for all creation, not just for Egypt. The great hymn to the Aten, a masterpiece of ancient literature often attributed to Akhenaten himself, lays out this theology with breathtaking clarity. It describes the Aten as the creator of all things, the one who made the earth as you wished, you alone, all peoples, herds and flocks. The hymn emphasizes the Aten's universality, noting that it created the distant lands. For them you have set a Nile in the sky, referring to the rain that watered foreign lands, a concept far removed from the localized power of the Egyptian Nile god, Hapi. This was a god of pure, unmediated light, a force of nature elevated to the status of the supreme and only deity. The key difference, and the source of so much conflict, lay in the concept of mediation. In Atonism, The only intermediary between the Aten and humanity was Akhenaten himself. The sun's rays, ending in hands holding the ankh, stretched down only to the royal family. The common people could only worship the Aten through the pharaoh and his queen, Nefertiti. This move effectively cut out the entire priesthood of Ammon, rendering their temples, their rituals, and their vast wealth utterly obsolete. The worship was public, conducted in open-air temples where the sun's light could flood the altars, a stark contrast to the dark, mysterious temples of Ammon. This was a religion of the day, a celebration of the visible, life-giving power of the sun, rejecting the complex, phonic, and nocturnal aspects of the old religion, particularly the emphasis on the afterlife and the underworld gods like Osiris. The shift in religious focus had immediate and profound consequences for the daily life of the citizens of Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. The city itself was a theological statement, a physical manifestation of the new faith, built in a remote, previously uninhabited location. It was a blank slate, free from the taint of the old gods. The speed of its construction was astonishing, a testament to the absolute power and zeal of the pharaoh. The city was laid out around a central axis, with the great temple of the Aten and the royal palace dominating the landscape. The architecture was revolutionary. The temples, unlike the massive, roofed structures of Karnak, were a series of open courts filled with hundreds of altars, allowing the sun's rays to fall directly upon the offerings. The focus was on light, space, and direct access to the divine. Life in Amarna, as revealed by the archaeological record, was a strange mix of utopian idealism and brutal pragmatism. The city was a melting pot of people drawn by the promise of the new faith and the opportunities of a new capital. Artists, scribes, administrators, and workers lived side by side, creating a vibrant, if temporary, culture. The Amarna period is unique for the sheer volume of domestic and administrative records that survived, giving us an unparalleled glimpse into the daily lives of the Egyptians. We find records of food rations, worker strikes, bureaucratic memos, and even children's toys. The art of the period, the famous Amarna style, was not confined to the royal monuments. It permeated the entire city. The naturalism and intimacy that characterized the royal portraits extended to the depiction of common people, animals, and nature. We see detailed, almost impressionistic, depictions of birds in flight, fish in the water, and plants in the garden. This was a brief, dazzling moment of artistic freedom and expression, a radical departure from the rigid conventions that had governed Egyptian art for millennia. The question of the Amarna art style, the elongated skulls, the androgynous bodies, the strange, almost sickly appearance of the royal family, continues to be the most compelling and unsettling aspect of Akhenaten's reign. The three main theories, stylistic choice, pathology, and ancient alien, each offer a compelling, yet incomplete, explanation. The stylistic choice theory is the most accepted in mainstream Egyptology. It views the art as a deliberate artistic and theological statement. The exaggerated features, the elongated neck, the sloping shoulders, the pot belly, are seen as a visual metaphor for the pharaoh's unique status as the sole intermediary between the Aten and humanity. The art is not a portrait of a man, but a portrait of an idea. The pathology theory, however, cannot be so easily dismissed. The sheer consistency of the features, combined with the later evidence from Tutankhamun's mummy, suggests a genetic reality. The proposed disorders, Marfan syndrome, Froelich syndrome, or a form of familial craniosynostosis, would explain the physical anomalies and the high rate of infant mortality and physical ailments in the royal line. The psychological dimension of this theory is fascinating. A king who, instead of hiding his affliction, chose to deify it, transforming a personal weakness into a divine blessing. This act of self-affirmation is a powerful testament to Akhenaten's messianic self-image. The ancient alien theory, while fringe, serves a crucial function. It highlights the profound otherness of the Amarna period. The art is so jarringly different from the 3,000 years of Egyptian tradition that it seems to demand an extraordinary explanation. The elongated skulls, the sudden appearance of a pure monotheism, the disk in the sky shooting down life-giving rays, these elements combine to create a narrative that, while scientifically unfounded, speaks to a deep human need to explain the inexplicable. The collapse of the Amarna experiment was as swift and violent as its creation. The Amarna letters, the diplomatic archive discovered in the ruins, paint a picture of a pharaoh so consumed by his religious vision that he neglected the very empire his ancestors had built. The letters are a chorus of desperation from vassal kings in the Levant, pleading for military aid against the encroaching Hittites and the local Epirus raiders. "Send me gold. Send me troops. Why have you abandoned us?" they cry. Akhenaten's failure to respond was not an oversight. It was a deliberate choice. His focus was entirely internal, on the spiritual purity of his new kingdom. The empire, the source of Egypt's wealth and power, was allowed to crumble. This political failure provided the final, fatal leverage for the priesthood of Ammon and the military elite. The death of Akhenaten, around 1336 BCE, marked the beginning of the end. The brief, confusing reigns of Smenkharen, the child king Tutankhaten, who would soon become Tutankhamun, were a period of rapid retreat. The court returned to Thebes, the city of Ammon. The name of the heretic was systematically erased. The damnatio memoriae was executed with a chilling thoroughness. Hormizd, the general who would eventually seize the throne, completed the restoration of the old order. He dismantled Akhenaten, using its stones as fill for his own monuments at Karnak, a final, symbolic act of erasure. The ghost of Akhenaten was buried under the weight of 3,000 years of tradition, a lesson in the dangers of zealotry and the power of the established order. But the story does not end there. The ghost of Akhenaten, and his radical idea, would not be so easily exorcised. Some scholars have suggested that the Aten's monotheism, this startlingly new concept of a single, universal God, did not simply vanish. They argue that it may have survived, in secret, carried by a small group of followers who fled Egypt after the collapse of Amarna. This is where the story takes its most speculative, and perhaps its most profound, turn. Could this rejected Egyptian idea have become the seed of another, far more influential, monotheistic faith? The figure of Moses, leading his people out of Egypt, is a powerful parallel. The historical timeline is tantalizingly close. Could the slaves who followed Moses have included the last, persecuted priests of the Aten, carrying their singular God with them into the desert? Sigmund Freud, in his controversial final work, Moses and Monotheism, went so far as to argue that Moses himself was an Egyptian, a high-ranking priest of Akhenaten's court, who tried to impose the Atenist religion on the Hebrew people. This is a theory that is, of course, impossible to prove and deeply contested by historians and theologians alike. But the similarities are striking. The rejection of idols, the concept of a single, all-powerful creator God, the emphasis on a personal relationship with that deity, all these have echoes in Akhenaten's revolution. The great hymn to the Aten, one of the most beautiful pieces of literature to survive from the ancient world, bears an uncanny resemblance to Psalm 104 from the Bible. Both praise a universal creator God who provides for all living things. Coincidence? Or a sign of a deeper, hidden connection? The question haunts us to this day. Did the attempt to erase Akhenaten from history paradoxically ensure his idea's survival by persecuting his followers? Did the pharaohs force them to carry their beliefs beyond Egypt's borders, where they could take root and flourish in new and unexpected ways? The story of Akhenaten is a story of revolution, of art, of religion, of a man who dared to challenge the very foundations of his world. But it is also a story about memory, and how the harder we try to forget something, the more powerful it can become. The pharaohs who came after him, Tutankhamun, and the great general Hormizd, dedicated their reigns to restoring Mat, the divine order that Akhenaten had so violently disrupted. They rebuilt the temples of Ammon, they reinstated the old priesthoods, and they began the systematic process of wiping the heretic king from the record. His city, Akhenaten, was abandoned, its stones reproposed for new buildings, its palaces and temples left to be reclaimed by the desert. His name was hacked from monuments, his statues smashed and buried. In the official king lists, the 17 years of his reign were simply omitted, as if they had never happened. For over 3,000 years, it worked. Akhenaten became a ghost, a half-forgotten rumor, a name whispered only by a few specialists who puzzled over the strange art and the missing years in the 18th dynasty. It was not until the 19th century, with the rediscovery of Amarna and the deciphering of the Amarna letters, that the full scope of his revolution began to be understood. And with that understanding came a new set of questions, questions that continue to challenge our understanding of history, religion, and the very nature of human belief. Was Akhenaten a visionary, a prophet who saw a truth that his people were not ready to accept? Or was he a madman, a fanatic whose obsession with his own divine vision led his country to ruin? Was his strange, androgynous form a sign of a divine calling, a genetic disease, or something else entirely? And what of his legacy? Is he a footnote in history, a failed heretic whose revolution was quickly extinguished? Or is he the hidden source of one of the most powerful ideas in human history, an idea that would go on to shape the destinies of billions? The mystery of Akhenaten is that there is no single answer. He is a mirror, reflecting our own beliefs and biases. To the rationalist, he is a political opportunist, using religion to consolidate his power. To the religious scholar, he is a mystic, a forerunner of the great monotheistic prophets. To the ancient alien theorist, he is a visitor from another world. He is all of these things, and none of them. He is the pharaoh who shouldn't exist, the ghost in the machine of Egyptian history, the man who set 3,000 years of tradition on fire and, in doing so, may have changed the world forever. The debate continues, fueled by new discoveries and new interpretations. The DNA of Tutankhamun and his family has been sequenced, providing tantalizing clues about their health and lineage. The ruins of Amarna are still being excavated, revealing new insights into the daily life of its inhabitants. And the Amarna letters continue to be studied, offering a window into the complex geopolitics of the Late Bronze Age. But the central enigma remains. Who was Akhenaten? And what was the true nature of his revolution? The answer, like the ruins of his city, is buried under the sands of time, waiting to be rediscovered. And perhaps it is in that very act of searching, of questioning, of trying to understand this most enigmatic of pharaohs, that we come closest to the truth. The story of Akhenaten is not just a story about ancient Egypt. It is a story about the power of ideas, the courage of conviction, and the enduring mystery of the human spirit. It is a story that, once heard, is impossible to forget. The restoration of the old order, the return to Mat, was not a peaceful transition. It was a period of intense political and religious upheaval, a counter-revolution that was as ruthless and systematic as Akhenaten's original revolution had been. The immediate aftermath of Akhenaten's death is shrouded in mystery, a testament to the chaos that gripped the royal court. The figure of Smenkhare, who appears briefly in the historical record as Akhenaten's co-regent and successor, is a phantom. Some scholars believe Smenkhare was a brother or son of Akhenaten, while others have controversially suggested that Smenkhare was actually Nefertiti, who had taken on a male persona to rule as pharaoh, a move not without precedent in Egyptian history. The evidence is scant and contradictory, a puzzle within the larger enigma of the Amarna period. Whoever Smenkhare was, their reign was short-lived, a fleeting attempt to maintain the Atenist faith in the face of mounting opposition. The real power was shifting back to Thebes, to the priesthood of Ammon, who had been waiting in the wings, their wealth and influence diminished but not extinguished. The true turning point came with the ascension of the boy king, Tutankhaten, the son of Akhenaten, likely by a secondary wife, or possibly even by his own sister. He ascended the throne at the tender age of 9, a pawn in a game of immense political and religious stakes. His very name, Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, was a testament to his father's faith. But the tide had turned. The court, under the influence of powerful advisors like the elder statesman A and the general Hormheb, recognized that the Atenist experiment was a catastrophic failure. The empire was crumbling, the treasury was empty, and the people were terrified and resentful. Within a few years of his reign, the young king made a momentous decision, one that would define his legacy. He abandoned his father's god. He changed his name to Tutankhamun, living image of Ammon, a clear and public declaration of the restoration of the old pantheon. The court abandoned the city of Akhenaten, leaving it to the desert winds, and returned to the traditional capital of Thebes. The temples of Ammon-Ra were reopened, their priesthoods restored to their former glory, and their coffers refilled with royal largesse. The restoration stela of Tutankhamun, a crucial historical document, details the extent of the damage done by Akhenaten's reign and the young king's efforts to repair it. The stela describes a land in ruins, with temples overgrown and gods neglected. It proclaims Tutankhamun as the one who drove out chaos from the two lands, so that Mat was established in its place. The propaganda was clear. The heretic was gone, and order had been restored. Tutankhamun's reign, though brief, was a period of immense artistic and architectural activity, all aimed at undoing his father's work. The art style, while retaining some of the naturalism and fluidity of the Amarna period, quickly reverted to the more traditional, formal style of the 18th dynasty. The famous treasures from his tomb, discovered by Howard Carter in 1922, are a stunning testament to this artistic synthesis, a blend of Amarna elegance and traditional Egyptian symbolism. The discovery of his tomb, almost perfectly intact, is one of the greatest archaeological finds in history, and it is the reason why Tutankhamun, a relatively minor king in the grand sweep of Egyptian history, is now the most famous of all the pharaohs. The irony is that his fame is a direct consequence of his father's heresy. The attempt to erase Akhenaten from history led his successors to bury Tutankhamun in a smaller, less conspicuous tomb in the Valley of the Kings, which was then inadvertently covered by the debris from the construction of a later tomb. This accidental concealment protected it from the rampant tomb robbing that plagued the valley for centuries, preserving its treasures for the modern world. The death of Tutankhamun at the age of 19, without an heir, created another succession crisis. He was succeeded by his elderly advisor, who had been a powerful figure at the Amarna court and had overseen the restoration of the Old Faith. A's reign was short, a brief interlude before the final, decisive phase of the counter-revolution. The real power behind the throne was the commander-in-chief of the army, Hormizd. He was a man of common birth who had risen through the ranks of the military, a pragmatist and a brilliant strategist. He had served under Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and patiently biding his time. Upon A's death, Hormizd seized the throne, not through royal blood, but through the sheer force of his military power and political acumen. His reign marked the true end of the Amarna period. Hormizd was the ultimate restorer, the man who would not just undo Akhenaten's revolution, but would attempt to erase it from memory altogether. He initiated the most intense phase of the damnatio memoriae. He declared Akhenaten, Smenkhare, Tutankhamun, and to be illegitimate rulers. He dated his own reign from the death of Amenhotep III, effectively wiping the entire Amarna period from the official king lists. He launched a massive campaign to dismantle the remaining structures at Akhenaten, using the stones, the so-called talatat blocks, as infill for his own massive construction projects at Karnak and Luxor. This act of desecration, while intended to destroy the heretic city, ironically preserved thousands of decorated blocks, which have been painstakingly reassembled by modern Egyptologists, providing a vital source of information about the Amarna period. Hormizd's persecution was relentless. He had the names of the Amarna kings hacked from every monument, their statues smashed, their tombs desecrated. His goal was to ensure that no trace of the heresy remained, that the memory of the Aten and its prophet would be lost to the sands of time. For over 3,000 years, he was largely successful. The story of Akhenaten became a garbled, half-forgotten legend, a ghost in the otherwise glorious history of the New Kingdom. The Moses connection, though speculative, remains a powerful hypothesis. The timeline is suggestive, placing the Exodus potentially in the centuries following the Amarna period. Could a group of Atenist priests and their followers, fleeing the persecution of Hormizd, have carried their monotheistic beliefs into the Sinai desert? The parallels between the great hymn to the Aten and Psalm 104, the rejection of idols, and the concept of a single, universal creator God are the spiritual echoes of Amarna. The story of Akhenaten is a powerful illustration of the nonlinear nature of history. Ideas do not always progress in a straight line. They can be born, rejected, and then reborn centuries later in a different context. The failure of Akhenaten's revolution in his own time was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The heretic king, in his failure, achieved a form of immortality that no other pharaoh could claim. His ghost is not just a historical curiosity. It is a fundamental part of the spiritual DNA of the modern world. To truly grasp the radical nature of Akhenaten's revolution, one must immerse oneself in the daily life of Akhenaten, the city he built for his god. It was a city of stark contrasts, a place where the utopian vision of the pharaoh clashed with the mundane realities of human existence. The city's layout itself was a break from tradition. Unlike the organic growth of Thebes, Akhenaten was a planned city, laid out on a grid, a testament to the rational, abstract nature of the Aten. The main thoroughfare, the royal road, ran parallel to the Nile, connecting the North Palace, the central city, and the South City. This road was the stage for the royal processions, a key element of the Atenist cult. The pharaoh and his family would ride in chariots, bathed in the sun's rays, a visible manifestation of the Aten's favor. This public display of the royal family was a deliberate contrast to the hidden, mysterious rituals of the Amun priesthood. The central city was the heart of the administration and the cult. It housed the great temple of the Aten, the small temple of the Aten, the royal palace, the records office, where the Amarna letters were found, and the administrative buildings. The great temple was a marvel of architectural innovation. It was a vast, open-air enclosure, nearly 800 meters long, designed to maximize exposure to the sun. It contained hundreds of small, identical offering tables, a democratic approach to worship that stood in stark opposition to the exclusive, hierarchical nature of the Amun temples. The offerings were not made in the dark, but in the full light of the sun, a symbol of the Aten's transparency and universality. The North Palace and the Meru Aten were pleasure palaces and ritual sites, featuring sunken gardens, artificial lakes, and painted floors depicting scenes of nature, birds, fish, and plants, all celebrating the life-giving power of the Aten. The art in these palaces, with its emphasis on naturalism and movement, was a deliberate rejection of the static, eternal art of the old regime. The private dwellings of the nobles and officials in the north and south suburbs offer a fascinating glimpse into the lives of the Amarna elite. The houses were large, well-appointed, and followed a standardized plan, suggesting a degree of social engineering. The walls were often decorated with scenes of the royal family in intimate, domestic settings, further emphasizing the personal and familial nature of the Aten cult. The presence of workers' villages, such as the one at the edge of the desert, reveals the immense logistical effort required to build the city. The workers, housed in small, uniform dwellings, were a microcosm of the social structure of the time. Records indicate that they were subject to the same bureaucratic controls and occasional labor disputes as workers in other parts of Egypt, suggesting that the utopian vision of Akhenaten did not entirely eliminate the realities of class and labor. The enigma of Queen Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come, is a story within a story, a mystery as profound as that of her husband, Akhenaten. She is not merely a supporting character in his revolution. She is a central figure, a woman of immense power, influence, and, ultimately, profound ambiguity. Her iconic bust, discovered in the workshop of the sculptor Thamos at Amarna, has made her the face of ancient Egypt, a symbol of timeless beauty and regal grace. But this image of serene perfection belies a far more complex and controversial reality. In the early years of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti is depicted as a devoted wife and mother, a constant presence at the pharaoh's side. She is shown in the intimate, naturalistic style of the Amarna art, participating in religious ceremonies, driving her own chariot, and sharing tender moments with her husband and their 6 daughters. This public display of a royal couple as partners was itself a revolution, a stark contrast to the more formal, patriarchal traditions of the past. Nefertiti was not just a queen. She was a high priestess of the Aten, a divine counterpart to Akhenaten. Her role was not merely symbolic. It was theological. The Aten's life-giving rays are often shown extending to her as well as to her husband, suggesting that she too was a crucial link between the divine and the mortal. But as the reign progressed, Nefertiti's role appears to have evolved. In some reliefs, she is shown in poses traditionally reserved for the pharaoh, such as smiting the enemies of Egypt. This has led to the theory that she was elevated to the status of a co-regent, ruling alongside Akhenaten with equal power. The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. The most radical theory, however, concerns her fate after year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, when she largely disappears from the historical record. This disappearance coincides with the appearance of the mysterious co-regent, Smenkhare. Could Nefertiti have adopted a male persona and a new name to rule as pharaoh? The idea is not without precedent. Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, had ruled as a man a century earlier. If Nefertiti did become Smenkhare, it would be a testament to her extraordinary ambition and political skill, a final, audacious act in a life defined by revolution. The alternative theories are more tragic. Some suggest she fell out of favor with Akhenaten, perhaps due to a disagreement over the increasingly fanatical nature of his reforms. Others believe she may have died from a plague that swept through Amarna, a victim of the very god she had helped to create. Her tomb has never been definitively identified, adding another layer of mystery to her story. She is the ghost queen of Amarna, a figure of immense beauty and power who vanishes at the height of the drama, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. The perspective of the common Egyptian during the Amarna period is a story that is often overlooked, but it is crucial to understanding the ultimate failure of the revolution. For the elite of Akhenaten, the new religion may have been an exciting intellectual and artistic adventure. But for the vast majority of the population, the farmers, the artisans, the soldiers, it was a terrifying and disorienting experience. The traditional Egyptian religion was a deeply personal and practical affair. The local gods were a part of daily life, providing comfort, protection, and a sense of order. The elaborate rituals surrounding death and the afterlife were not just abstract beliefs. They were a vital technology for ensuring one's eternal survival. Akhenaten's revolution swept all of this away. He closed the temples, he outlawed the worship of the old gods, and he declared the entire pantheon to be a fraud. For the average Egyptian, this was not a reformation. It was an apocalypse. The gods who had protected Egypt for millennia were gone, replaced by a single, distant, and abstract deity who seemed to care only for the pharaoh and his family. The afterlife, once a well-mapped journey through the underworld guided by Osiris and Anubis, was now a terrifying void. The only path to eternal life was through devotion to Akhenaten, a man who seemed increasingly detached from the realities of his people. The economic consequences of the revolution were also devastating. The closure of the temples of Ammon and the other gods was a massive economic shock. The temples were not just religious centers. They were major landowners, employers, and centers of commerce. The confiscation of their wealth and the firing of their priests created widespread unemployment and social unrest. The focus on building the new city of Akhenaten also diverted resources from the rest of the country, leading to neglect and decay. The Amarna letters are a testament to the political consequences of this neglect, but the archaeological evidence from other parts of Egypt tells a story of economic decline and social breakdown. The revolution was not just a war on the gods. It was a war on the very fabric of Egyptian society. The backlash, when it came, was not just a political maneuver by the old elite. It was a popular uprising, a desperate attempt to restore the old certainties and the old gods. The speed with which the country reverted to the traditional religion after Akhenaten's death is a testament to the profound and widespread rejection of his ideas. The ghost of Akhenaten is not just the ghost of a heretic king. It is the ghost of a failed utopia, a reminder that a revolution imposed from the top down, without the consent or understanding of the people, is doomed to fail. The story of Akhenaten is a cautionary tale about the dangers of intellectual arrogance and the importance of respecting the deeply held beliefs of ordinary people. The final, and perhaps most important, legacy of Akhenaten is the concept of the thought virus, the idea that a concept, once unleashed, can take on a life of its own, spreading and mutating in ways that its creator could never have anticipated. Akhenaten's monotheism was a radical departure from the religious norm of the ancient world. It was an idea that was too abstract, too universal, and too intolerant for its time. It failed to take root in the soil of Egypt, but it did not die. It became a seed, carried by the winds of history, waiting for more fertile ground. The parallels with later philosophical and religious movements are striking. The Platonic concept of the form of the good, a single, transcendent source of all truth and reality, has echoes of the Aten. The Gnostic belief in a single, remote, and unknowable God, opposed to the flawed, material world, is a darker reflection of the Amarna theology. And, of course, the great monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with their emphasis on a single, universal, and transcendent creator, are the ultimate inheritors of Akhenaten's revolution. The story of Akhenaten is a powerful illustration of the nonlinear nature of history. Ideas do not always progress in a straight line. They can be born, rejected, and then reborn centuries later in a different context. The failure of Akhenaten's revolution in his own time was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The heretic king, in his magnificent, disastrous failure, may have been the most influential figure in human history. He is the ghost in the machine of Western civilization, the man who set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the world we live in today. The final, unsettling question is this: if Akhenaten's idea was a thought virus, what are the thought viruses that are shaping our own time? And what will be their ultimate, and perhaps unintended, consequences? The story of Akhenaten is a story that is still being written, a story that forces us to confront the power of ideas to shape our world, for better or for worse. The sun sets on the ruins of Amarna, but the idea that was born there continues to illuminate and to burn. The heretic king is dead, but his ghost is everywhere, and it is a ghost that will continue to haunt us, as long as we dare to ask the big questions about God, about truth, and about the ultimate meaning of our existence. The story of Akhenaten is not just a story about the past. It is a story about the future, a story that is waiting for its next, and perhaps its final, chapter. The enduring fascination with Akhenaten is not merely a product of his radical theology or the unique beauty of Amarna art. It is also a reflection of our modern anxieties about charismatic leaders, ideological purity, and the societal cost of utopian dreams. Akhenaten can be seen as the prototype of the modern revolutionary, a figure who, driven by a powerful and singular vision, seeks to remake the world in his own image, regardless of the human cost. His story is a powerful allegory for the dangers of absolute power and the seductive allure of a simple, all-encompassing truth. The parallels with later historical figures, from Robespierre to Lenin to Mao, are striking. Each of these leaders sought to create a new society based on a radical new ideology, and each was willing to use force and coercion to achieve their goals. The story of Amarna, with its initial burst of creative energy followed by a descent into intolerance and collapse, is a pattern that has been repeated throughout history. The ghost of Akhenaten is the ghost of all failed revolutions, a warning that the road to utopia is often paved with the stones of desecrated temples and the bones of forgotten victims. The final, and perhaps most unsettling, aspect of Akhenaten's legacy is the question of his sanity. Was he a genuine mystic, a man who had a direct and profound experience of the divine, or was he a megalomaniac, a man whose narcissism and messiah complex led him to believe that he was the chosen son of God? The evidence can be read both ways. The great hymn to the Aten is a work of genuine spiritual beauty, a testament to a profound and personal faith. But the ruthless persecution of the old gods, the neglect of his empire, and the deification of his own family suggest a mind that had lost its grip on reality. The androgynous and distorted imagery of the royal family can be interpreted not just as a theological statement or a genetic anomaly, but as a reflection of a deeply disturbed psyche. This is the ultimate enigma of Akhenaten. The line between the prophet and the madman is often terrifyingly thin. His story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the most powerful and transformative ideas in human history have often come from the most troubled and unstable minds. The search for Akhenaten is not just a historical quest. It is a psychological one, a journey into the heart of human faith, ambition, and madness. The heretic king is a mirror, and in his strange, elongated face, we see a reflection of our own capacity for both divine inspiration and destructive delusion. The sun sets on the desert, and the ghost of the heretic king whispers a final, unsettling question: what is the difference between a god and a monster? The answer, like the man himself, remains lost in the sands of time, a permanent and unsettling mystery at the heart of the human story.